All right, so here we are in Houdini, and we can see that Redshift is correctly installed because this drop-down menu is appearing right here. So what I'm going to do is open up the project file for this course, which is going to be based off of this image that I created here. And if you want to follow along exactly, this file is available on my Gumroad, and the link is in the description below. So I'm going to open up that file by going to the File menu and saying Open. And I'm going to just go to my project folder here and open up this Elements of Houdini start file. So let's hit Accept. And you can see that it's going to think a little bit. You can see down here in the lower left-hand corner, this is sort of a little status indicator as to what's going on. Kind of a common thing in a lot of DCCs to have a little status thing down here in the lower left-hand corner. It takes a little while to load the initial data and recalculate all that network that built all these elements. So let's see what we've got here. We've got our scene view here, where all the, just a viewport, which you're used to from other apps. And down here in the lower right-hand corner, we've got a network view. And then up here is a parameters view. This is more like the attribute editor if you're familiar with Cinema 4D. If we select one of these nodes, you can kind of see that we get a transform and, various other tabs to kind of control some of the properties of these different objects in our network view. Then up top, we've got shelve tools, and these are good for accomplishing various tasks, etc. You'll also see that each one of these panes has various tabs associated with it. You can see that we've got an animation editor, render view, etc. So that we can kind of toggle back and forth between various, panes that we might be using. And I'll get more into how we can customize that later on. So the first thing let's do is let's just get a render fired up of where we're at right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a camera, and I'm going to do it from the shelf up here. But I'm going to actually I'm going to hold down the control key when I click on this camera because it'll actually then create the camera from our view. So holding control and clicking the camera shelf tool, you can see that it has created a camera out of this view, and you can see it kind of framed in right here. Now this red is indicating that the camera is locked to our current view. So any tumbling I do in this viewport is going to bring this camera along, and I don't want that to accidentally happen. So I'm going to just unclick this lock icon right here, and that will leave the camera where it's supposed to be in case we need to move around or something like that. The next thing I'm going to do, you can see over here in the network view, is that it has created a camera for us. So I'm just going to click that and go up to the View tab on the Parameters view right here, and just change the resolution. I'm going to set the resolution to 1920 by 2400, and that brings us back to that nice kind of portrait view that we're using for this example file. Next thing we need is a light. So let's go and create a Redshift light from the Redshift menu. We're going to scroll down here to Add RS Light and Release, and it's created a light. Now, I still see the manipulator for the camera. I'm just going to click on the Redshift light, and then you can see that we get this handle for the light itself. And if the handle isn't appearing, you just want to make sure that this icon is selected on the left here, and that'll give you the handles that you need to manipulate your light. So I'm going to grab the Z axis and just pull it back a little bit to bring it outside of the object. And then I'm not going to use the render view that's built in here on this tab. This is like Houdini's render view, and it's great if you're using Mantra or something like that. But since we're using Redshift, I want to use the Redshift view that we're all familiar with. So let's say on the Redshift menu, we're going to go to Open Render View. Open that up, and you can see that this interface looks very much like what you're used to maybe from Cinema 4D or another package. This is the Redshift render view that we all know and love. So I'm going to click the play button right here, and that's going to just get our really bare bones render off the ground. And there you can see it. Obviously, we got a lot of work to do here. There's no materials except for on these proxy objects. But yeah, that's the basics of how you get renderings going as quickly as possible. And we'll explore more from there. One more thing I wanted to do before we take a detour into learning a little bit better how to use this interface is just get a material assignment on one of these objects. Now, this part is probably the most confusing of the whole process, but we'll just kind of go through it real quick just so we can see how it's done on one object, and then we'll come back and revisit whole material creation assignment thing later on. So I'm just going to minimize that right now. And let's go over to our network here. We've got all of our objects. I'm going to just grab everything except for the poly render, and I'm going to just turn the display flag off. So I'm going to grab all these nodes and go over here where this view comes up and just turn the eye off, so that all we have is this underlying poly that we have under here. You should see that there's only a blue flag on this poly render right here, like that. That's how you kind of turn things on and off. And the next thing I'm going to do is create a material. So we can't create materials out here in the object level. We actually use the material context for that, which you can see from this drop down right here. So I'm going to go there. You can see there's already a material here because I had created one to place onto the Redshift flower proxy instance. We're just going to create a new material right here by hitting the tab key and typing rs material builder, and hit the enter key. And you've got a Redshift VOPNet. Now this is a container for your shader. So we can just say, we'll call this the poly. And if we jump inside here, this is our basic material setup. We've got standard material being applied, and these are the Redshift outputs that we're used to in maybe the Espresso editor, in Cinema 4D, etc. So I'm just going to jump out here, grab the poly, and drop it right onto this. Grab the poly material and drop it onto this what is it? Icosahedron thing that we have right here. And then I'm going to just bring back up the render view, and let's fire off another render. And we can't really tell that any material has been applied here, but if we dive inside the poly and select our standard material and change the color to red, we can see that that material has been assigned here. And just another thing before we move on to the next section is how to get to your render settings. You just kind of go over here, and we'll talk about context later, but the render settings are stored in the out context. So you just, from this little drop down right here, select the out context, and then you have your Redshift drop right here. Now, if you just expand this down and you go to the Redshift tab right here, this has got a lot of your settings. And so that's just sort of like a quick place to go if you're looking to mess with render settings. But we'll get into more of this context node stuff later, but just didn't want to leave you hanging if you were looking for the render settings. All right, cool. So now let's move on to the next section.